Good evening, friends. I'm Saket Bansal, and today we are going to talk about Scrum and related topic, how Scrum can help in improving our product development or a project approaches. So, this session assumes that we have participants who are exploring Scrum and they are thinking how can they use Scrum in improving their product development process. So that's an assumption for this particular webinar audience set. Since the content is expected to be the base level, foundation level, which primarily puts an perspective around how Scrum helps in solving product management problem. Now, I do understand many of you might be already knowing about Agile and Scrum. So I am running a poll which can help me to know about all of you, and so that I can little bit adjust my talk based on the type of audience we have today. So please select your awareness of Agile and Scrum, and let's see how many of us are still exploring Scrum. Great, so just pick up a choice. If you just get confused, pick up the one which makes most appropriate sense to you. And that's the idea of this particular poll. Okay, so we got some information, and let me share the results with you so that you also know your fellow participants, and then you can also make some adjustment on the content I am speaking. So we do have a good number of explorers who are just exploring what is Agile and Scrum, and we do have a people who have already done 1 level of 2 level of Agile training. So like approximately 40% individuals are already Agile certified or Scrum certified, and there are 20% audience who are still using Scrum. So the 37 who are exploring Agile and Scrum are the perfect audience for it. I hope rest of you will also get some value from this particular session. So let's start with little bit details about Scrum. Now we think Scrum solves all of our product development or a software development problem. Though Scrum is a broad framework which can be used in any complex product development context. But for this particular webinar, we are primarily talking about Scrum getting used in software development. So many of us think that if we apply Scrum, our software development process will become better. But the reality is, Scrum does not solve any problem. It just exposes the problem which are associated with software development. It just makes them visible. After that, the self-organized team need to do something about it. Your problem can only be solved by you. They can't be solved by Scrum. So we go through some of those fundamental details in this particular session. I will take one Q&A break in between, and then I will take a question at the end of the session. If you get any query in your mind, feel free to post them in a question section. They will reach me, and I will address them when I reach to those Q&A breaks. Now, I start with the typical project stories. Many of you who are still exploring Agile and Scrum might be still working in this context. We start thinking about a product development using a project approach. We make detailed project plan during the initial stages of a project, and we project one end date based on our estimation, based on the requirement we get from the stakeholder. So we have an end date in mind. But as the red part shows the reality, so the blue color is showing is the planned approach for a typical project. The red part is showing the real approach, the reality of the project as we move forward. And most of the time, especially when we are dealing with new software development projects, we reach to a stage where we overshoot our estimated development time. This has been my experience. Now your experience might be different, but we can just capture that using another poll which I have prepared for today, just 2 polls for today. And this poll will help us in knowing, in your experience, how much percentage schedule overrun you have seen in so what I'm trying to ask here is, like, typically, it's a typical answer. When you do a project for developing a product, you may find you overshoot your initial estimate. I'm using the word, the initial time cost baseline projection you make. What is a typical percentage of that overshoot? So that's the question which I am asking. I do find in my experience they have been overshooting most of the time, and they have been overshooting for more than 30 to 40% in my experience, but your experience might be different, and we take them forward and take it. Great. So let me share the results with you. So you can see that typically majority of you have been in facing challenges, and more than 30% of the time our project timelines get overshooted by our initial estimate. And I call that time which is after that estimated project end date is a messy time, a time where everybody expects the project should be over, but project is not over. So what are the characteristics of this messy time? Usually this messy time has high stress in the development team, high stress in the stakeholders. Stakeholders are very disappointed that we gave them all the time, all the money they asked for. We gave them all the requirements as many times they asked for, and still we don't have anything in hand. Team is struggling that yes, we did everything, the project was looking cool, was looking better, but right now we have so many defects, our architecture is giving us issue, and we are getting a lot of change requests from the customers, because during the messy time customer also start reviewing and the stakeholder also start reviewing our content very carefully. In the initial stages, till the time the project was looking green, the project was looking clean, nobody was much interested in what is going on. But as project becomes red, everybody wants to know what all requirements has been developed, what you guys have done it. The more stakeholder customer looks at it, the more change request we starts getting. And many times the good project management team as well as development team do a lot of negotiation during that time. We negotiate with the stakeholders, look, we are already delayed, and if you keep pushing us for all the requirement, we won't be able to finish this project even after taking 30%, 40% more time. So let's do some scope adjustment. So a lot of scope adjustment starts happening during that particular messy time. Now, the idea is that how can we get rid of such kind of problems where we discover delays at the end, where we do changes at the end, where we start doing adjustment to the scope at the end, where the customers start getting engaged very late in the development process, where they find things are going out of hand. Now here, when we dig into the details, there are multiple dimensions need to be worked on. The first dimension which I am picking up is the team dimension, the way we usually organize the structure of our project team or a development team. Traditionally, we have been making a project team. So there is a project manager who works as a single point of contact to all the stakeholders. And he is the one who facilitates, or many times he does the capturing of stakeholders' requirements. He is the one who estimates the project duration. He may take helps, but finally he is the one who communicates those estimates to the stakeholders. And for all the stakeholders, project manager is kind of a CEO of a development project, and whatever he commits, they expect should get met. So that is how we start with the project. Internally, project manager sometimes has its own functions. Sometimes you have a development function, testing function, business analysis function. So you have all groups inside your development team. And many times these functions are headed by their team leaders, sometimes function leads. And project manager work with those function leads, talk about the requirement, share whatever he know from the stakeholders, and expect these function leads to work with the development team to get the things done. Many times project manager also end up assigning the work directly. So typically a format could be that you may have a one hierarchy in between, or the project manager might be directly working with a group. Now, the problem which got discovered while analyzing this structure in many of the project I would say postmortems, project manager was really not knowing what is happening at the ground, because since he is taking status and he may not be knowing the subject details of those functions, many times the internal details remain hidden from project managers. And many times, even if he knows about it, he end up not communicating those challenges, risk to the stakeholders well, and so stakeholders don't get the early warning signals. Development team feels that ultimately it's a task of a project manager to get this project going, to get this project finishing on time. So they just focus on their part of the job. They don't take an accountability of delivering the whole product. So they work in their own silos. Whatever has been assigned, they try to finish it as per the project management plan. And project manager try to create a sense of certainty where he himself is not having control on the whole situation, because he does not understand what software challenges team is facing, and at the same time he does not even control the stakeholder needs and expectation as they keep getting evolving throughout the project duration. So what best possibly a project manager does it, he tried to create a balance by way of creating lots of documentation, by taking sign-offs, and by doing some detail estimation and doing many milestones review. But usually that approach does not result into project getting on time. So expectation from project manager, on-time delivery, challenge, requirement, and the speed of development are unpredictable. So project manager try to give an on-time delivery in a very unpredictable environment. Expectation from a project manager, from stakeholder expects that he will deliver all the scope as on time. Reality, scope keeps changing, especially towards the end of the project when people start seeing what they have asked for. So or when what they have perceived they are asking for, because when they see something in action, they may find everything is different. Project manager expectation from project manager is he should be able to manage stakeholder well. Challenge is managing stakeholders without understanding business domain, without understanding technology domain, and just managing them at a management level sometimes does not result into a better management in today's environment, because things are becoming more and more complex and abstract. The situations are changing. Requirements are not fixed. It cannot be documented on a one paper and signed off and can delivered. Things are changing very fast. So in those context, managing stakeholder, engaging them does not result, is not that easy for a one person. Expectation from stakeholder is he should have a full control on the team, what they are doing, how they are doing, where they are spending time. We should have a full control on that. But in reality, it is not the case. In reality, you have a situation where you don't know where the development is going. You just have some status report on the Excel sheet, project management plan, which says 50% complete, 40% complete, but real completion, real work assignment is many times is not clear to the project manager as well as to the stakeholders, because information is passing through them. So what do we do? Now Scrum looks at this problem and think of, why don't we split the work done by project manager into 3 focused roles? And Scrum comes up with more decentralized way of managing projects or managing development, and they introduce role called product owner, Scrum master, and development team. So there is not one person who is trying to control requirement, work allocation, estimation, and projection for end delivery. There is no one person, because one person may not be able to do it efficiently since the situations are changing very dynamically. So there are 3 people who plays, or 3 roles rather than people, 3 roles who plays a different role. So product owner is a business ownership role. So the role of a product owner is, I don't get involved in how the development is going on. I primarily focus on what is needed from the business. And based on what development team is providing me at a frequency, I do my forecast of various delivery dates. But I don't tell the developers, do like this, do like that. I primarily focus on domain part of the product, engaging stakeholder, managing product requirement, and based on that development speed, giving the projection. Scrum Master. The Scrum Master role is primarily coaching, facilitating, guiding about the process, ensuring people know where they stand, fixing out the problems which team cannot take care of on their own. So coaching, mentoring, facilitation, process adherence or process championship, this all work is done by Scrum Master. The development team, the people who are really getting engaged in the development, takes the ownership of their own management. They are responsible for figuring out how they want to do the things. They are responsible for decomposing the big requirements into a small manageable task so that they can work in collaboration with each other. They are responsible for ensuring transparency, and they are taking an accountability for delivering the product as product owner asks. So it's not like you always keep looking at a project manager or any one role. You are the one who told us, and these are the problem, now tell us what to do. The whole team has to figure it out how to achieve a goal of delivering product as asked by the business. Now, in a simple metaphor, I usually tend to think like a factory. So think of that you run a software development factory. Your team figure out how things has to be done inside the factory. You have one guy who keeps interacting with the business and gets the orders for the factory. And this guy also give a projection to the business based on your factory capacity, that what possibly can come next month. And based on that capacity, he manages the dynamic changing orders from the business. And then you have a Scrum Master who ensures the lighting, water supply, and all the environment in the factory is productive. People are able to focus on what they are expected to do. And that's the role of a Scrum Master. So the first area of solving delayed project is looking at the way traditional project teams were organized and trying to create an environment where more people are accountable for taking the product forward. So that's the first thing Scrum does. Now, I can see there are various questions. I will try to take the one which are relevant at this stage. The one which may get delivered later, we will take them separately. Okay, so we will talk about certifications and other related queries. There are a few. In traditional project management, let's see if I'm comparing PM methodology from PMBOK. We will follow. So we will take care of how things work here. Okay, the interesting question came is, can one person do a role of a Scrum Master, product owner, and development team, or 2 or 3? Now, Scrum does not say any specific thing for it, but it is definitely recommended to have separate individuals playing those roles. Especially the role of a product owner and Scrum Master is expected to kept separate. Expected. If you have a very mature individual, then it's a separate case. But the idea is that if you give a one person, again, you create a bottleneck and you are limiting your thought process based on a one person. So it gives too much power to a one guy, and which makes difficult to manage. Okay, I think a lot of questions are coming, which will be addressed once I look at the things. So there was one specific question came, can we repeat the role of a Scrum Master? The role of a Scrum Master is, you can say, we have a term called servant leader. It is more like a leader who create an environment where team can do their job. And he is always available to serve the team if something gets stuck. If something team is unable to do on its own, Scrum Master is there to help them. So he does coaching. He helps team to think through well. He facilitate creation of an environment so people can figure out how to do the things well. Traditionally, project manager was responsible for assigning the work and getting the work from the development team members. The Scrum Master is not responsible for assigning the work and getting the work from the development team member. He is responsible for creating a development team which can assign the work to themselves and which can manage themselves. So Scrum Master is responsible for creating a team which can win the match. So he's not giving an instruction to win the match. If it's a game team, he's responsible for creating the team which wins the match. But team takes all the on-ground decision on their own. So that's the idea of Scrum Master. Okay, so let's look at the questions which came, and some of them will get responded if we look at our flow. Now, in the traditional software development lifecycle, we do phased approach. Many times we call it waterfall or whatever name we want to give it, a predictive lifecycle. We have a one phase, and after one phase get closed, we start the second phase, third phase. Sometimes we have some parallel phases, but it's more like a sequence of things, and towards the end we will see something getting completed. Now this process works perfect if we can maintain that next phase catches the problem related to the previous phase. Now let me become very specific. If we capture the requirement and we get into the design phase, we should be able to find out gaps in the requirement in the design phase if they exist. Then we move from design to development phase. We should be able to find out gaps in the design during development phase. So if we can maintain that in our work situation, then we don't need Scrum. We can very well work with predictive lifecycle. It is something like a software requirement or a development project where requirements can be pretty much projected, and they usually remain as they get projected for the project duration. They don't change in between. Where the design usually get projected in the beginning and the design don't change once we move forward. If you have that, then it's good. But if you see the red lines in your project environment, like during testing, during a late in the project lifecycle, you find out gaps which are primarily linked with requirement. Or during user acceptance testing, when the user starts seeing it, they realize, oh, this is something wrong you guys have developed. We never asked for it. So if your project brings late feedbacks, then doing things in a big size is risky. Now I repeat myself again. If I'm doing 100 items, if I am, say, I'm preparing a burger, and if I am preparing a very predictable burgers, I'm addressing a party, then I create 100 burger in a one go and give it to the party people that now eat it. So all 100 burgers has been prepared and they have been given for eating. And if people eat it, there's no problem. I have been doing it for a while. Then it's a great process. I should be preparing 100 burgers and dispatching it. Big batch size. But if my project is not like a burger, I am giving customized food recipes to the people, and people taste in a party varies, and there is no very defined standard for my food. In that case, if I prepare a food in advance for 100 people and the first person who eats it may not like it, then I'm taking a big risk because I need to fix my 100 people food. So the big batch size, if I do a big requirement design development testing, I need to be very sure what customer needs. I should be able to read their mind well. If I can't, then I should not be doing big thing. I should be making small food, give it few people for testing. Then depending upon the feedback, I should modify my food, and gradually I should reach to a stage where I may deliver the whole party food. So I need to take a feedbacks. So if we do a late discovery of a feedback frequently, then the traditional process will result into delays and lot of changes towards the end. If that is not your case, Scrum is not needed for you. But what Scrum does it is primarily for the problem where late feedbacks are coming and producing lot of rework. It tells that let's work on incremental path, and at the end of a defined duration, produce something which can be looked upon, which can be felt, which can be used for taking the feedbacks. Now, once we have that thing in our hand, then we can provide the clear feedback and to the stakeholder that this is something which I really need or this is something which I don't need. So we develop product incrementally. The bottom line where I am showing, it is like creating a food, serving to 10 people. They liked it. They gave some feedback. Changing it, then serving to another 20 people. They gave more feedback. Then finally you create a capacity where you start selling for 100 people. So the second path is more good for when you are discovering the recipe. You are not directly in a party. You are not sitting in a party and committed that I will serve to 100 people. Because when you are discovering a recipe, your project duration may vary. And when you are discovering a recipe, the duration is not the focus, the best recipe is the focus. So we need to see which type of project we are in. If we have a very predictable requirement, people will talk too much about time. If we have a very unpredictable requirement, people will talk about what really we are going to make. That is more important. So if we are in the process of creating recipes, the Scrum process is perfect for us. And if we don't apply Scrum process there, we will have lots of delays and messes. If we believe one project manager can tell how the recipe should look like, or one project manager can commit to the stakeholder, I will give you a best recipe for your food, and then can tell what the customer need to the team, it will be a big failure. So those kind of projects suits towards Scrum, and you need a different management structure and process structure. Now how things works. So this small box which you saw in a previous thing, there are time boxes. We call them sprints in Scrum. So we decide one experimental exploration duration. We tell that, okay, we want to experiment something for a X number of days, and we will see what comes out of it. We call it sprint. It's an iteration. It's a time box iteration. Scrum says don't go for more than 30 days because else you may be carrying a big risk. Usually people run 2 weeks long sprints. In this particular sprint, you do everything. It's not like you are only capturing requirement, you are only doing designing, you are only doing development. It has to be, it should include all the steps which are needed to get the product releasable. It's possible that initial few sprints you don't have a releasable product in hand, but your goal should be that you should be moving towards which can be at least, it gives a sense of working product to the stakeholders, so they get real feeling of the product. And this all get done in a time box duration. We call it sprint. So rather than projecting the whole requirement in the beginning, Scrum projects are run with a series of sprints. And each sprint we produce something which can be demonstrated. Now in order to do that, we need to change the approach of requirements, that we need to change the approach of design and development. So primarily I'm talking about requirement first. In traditional projects, so this graph shows that the bottom line is showing time in project or product development. So the more ahead we are moving, it's like delayed, and efforts in requirements. In traditional projects, we spend too much time in requirement in the initial stages of the project. We try to baseline everything. We try to make project everything which is needed for the whole project duration. Say, if I'm following a traditional project for 1 year project, I may do requirement intensive work for initial 2 or 3 months. And after that, I may do a little bit management or maintenance of it, but extensive work has been done in the beginning itself. That is what, even if you follow progressive elaboration, we do in a traditional projects. In Scrum-based project, requirements are evolving. Means we don't know exactly what taste we need from the recipe. We do have a guideline that we want to have something which can be cooked in 15 minutes or something like that. We may have some constraints, some vision for it, but we don't know exactly how will it taste. And we don't try to project it in the beginning only, the description of that taste. We create something, we give a demo, and then we take a feedback and refine the requirement later. So exploration or a discovery of a requirements in a Scrum project is a continuous process. It's not a one-time process. When we are working on the product development, at the same time, we are also working on identifying which next requirement we should pick so that stakeholder get the best value. The focus in a Scrum project is not that we got a contract and these are the 20 requirements, we should finish it at the end of 1 year. If you have that kind of project, Scrum is not needed for you. If it really likes that. But if you start assuming that you have a 20 requirements, but once you go to the customer after 1 year, customer says out of 20, 10 requirements are useless, you have understood it wrong, then you might have selected the wrong process for those requirements. So the idea of a Scrum is progressive elaboration, discovering of requirements. Now, how do we do that? We use a running list of requirement, which is called product backlog in Scrum. So product backlog is a collection of requirements which is sorted, which has small items on the top, means something which are well elaborated, and which has a big item towards the bottom. So it's like, if I want to make a big project, I might be knowing exactly in detail what I'm right now focusing on developing next month. But I may have a vague idea about the next 2 months, and I may not have any idea about what I'm going to work on after 1 year. So for a 1 year thing, I may have a big item. So you can see at the bottom, we have a big items, and they are more like a placeholders. I want to have a dashboard, but I don't know what all indicators dashboard will have. My website will evolve, and finally I will have a detailed requirement of dashboard. So the whole requirements are decomposed or say disaggregated in a different layer or different level. The top level requirements are small. As we go down in priority, the requirement details are less. Now they don't remain like this. As you move in time, this backlog gets refined. You add requirements, you delete some requirements from it, and you refine the not yet elaborated requirement in detail based on what you are learning product after showing product to the stakeholders and what you are learning in the market. So it's a continuous enhancement of product direction. It's a continuous discovery of product features. It's a continuous discovery of customer preferences along with development work. This works, and this is needed when you are dealing a problem which is not fixed. The customer taste is changing as they see something working. If you are working in that domain, that is the perfect case for using Scrum. So we use it using product backlog. Now how it works further? I introduced sprint before, so it's a time box duration. Inside the sprint, we pick up some item from the product backlog based on what can be done in this much time, assuming you have a 2 weeks long sprint. So in the beginning of a 2 weeks, product owner, now I have introduced that role, and development team will talk to each other. Development team will share that this is something we can do, this much something we can do in this 2 weeks time. Product owner will tell, these are the things which I want you to do. So based on what is needed from the business, the product owner judgment based on the stakeholders and all, and the capacity of the team, they figure out the balance and they create the detailed plan, which is called sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is a plan for the sprint. The sprint duration could be 2 weeks or 1 month. It's a plan for that small duration only. And it's a detailed plan for that small duration only. And team works throughout the sprint, and finally they produce something working based on what they have picked up in the beginning of 2 weeks. There could be a mismatch between what they commit and what they show, but it is still isolated to 2 weeks time. If something is not working out, it gets exposed in 2 weeks time. If team is unable to meet their commitments, it is clear in 2 weeks time. So next time onwards, they can refine their commitments. All the technical challenges, all the requirement challenges, all the business challenges get exposed at the end of 2 weeks because the product goes to the stakeholders for feedbacks. And this is how the Scrum works. And these are the 3 artifacts of Scrum. In Scrum, we produce a product backlog, which is a big list of requirements, which is keep emerging throughout the product development lifecycle. We have a sprint backlog, which is a detailed plan for that sprint duration. And at the end of a sprint, we call potentially releasable increment, which is more like, which includes the previous development plus new, and it shows it is ready for reviews and feedbacks. Now, in order to make this process work, Scrum introduced some meetings. They call it events, like how this whole structure will work. There is a container. I am talking about sprint all the time. So this is a container in which 4 events happens. And these events helps us to bring that rhythm which is needed for Scrum. The first event is called sprint planning. In this event, product owner and development team come together and figure out what can be done in 2 weeks time in detail. After that, they start working, And on a daily level, they meet for 15 minutes to take a view on how we are moving towards a sprint goal. So it's a 15 minutes, you can say, coordination, transparency, replanning, meeting, where things get exposed, get shared, and it happens on a daily basis. We call it daily Scrum. Towards the end of a sprint, we show the product, the increment, which we have seen in the previous slide, to the world, ask feedback from them, and we call this meeting sprint reviews. And once the sprint review is done, we take a feedback on the process. How are we doing in our development process? How can we make our life better next sprint onwards? How can we achieve more happiness for the team as well as for stakeholders next sprint onwards? We do a retrospective where we do an analysis of what went good and what was not that good in that particular sprint and how to improve on it. The retrospective brings maybe a new additional steps in your next sprint onwards, and Scrum promotes fixing up your process by doing retrospective. Whatever here Scrum gives you, it's a very, very basic container. You can't develop everything just using this container. You need to add a lot of stuff into it. But those stuff can only be discovered by you, your team, and that discovery happens in sprint retrospective. And that discovery changes with time. Sometime in the beginning of the project, you may need a lot of technological exploration work. You may want to start allocating some team time for technology exploration. As you move forward, that might not be needed. So depending upon where you stand, what kind of a project you are in, what kind of a requirement you have, you fix up your process for the next rhythm. And that is something called sprint retrospective. So you need to own your own process. This is just a basic container of framework. So if I summarize, Scrum is very simple. You have 3 roles: product owner, Scrum master, and development team. You have events, 5 events, 4 events. So you may find this controversy. In a simple word, you have a sprint which holds 4 events inside it: sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. Then you have 3 artifacts which get produced in Scrum: product backlog, sprint backlog, and increment. It's so simple that complete Scrum can be covered in 16-page guide, or now 17-page guide. You can just Google Scrum guide. You can download the Scrum guide and it covers all the details which is covered in Scrum. But in practice, people end up adding a lot of stuff to those basic containers to make it work for you. And that is what the expectation from Scrum. So if I summarize, this is expected to be the last slide, and then I will take the questions. If I summarize, Scrum is a framework. It's not a methodology. Why it is not a methodology? Because it does not tell you how to do coding. It does not tell you how to sequence your coding. It does not tell you how to prioritize the backlog. It does tell you that product owner does it as he find relevant. So it is a basic container which gives us minimum thing. It does not tell you how to project end date. You need to figure out your own process, which varies from one team to another team. It gives a framework which can be applied in all complex software development processes where you are still discovering your need. That's a framework where you can apply it, and you need to enhance your method, because framework only will not solve your problem. You need to have your own method or your process of doing things. That process will get discovered by you following this framework. It promotes early feedback. It promotes that we should create a process, we should create a framework which enforces that people should show what they are working on frequently. They should show where they stand at a frequent duration. Early feedback. It promotes prioritization. Now, in many of the traditional projects, we end up doing prioritization because the project is not finishing on time, but that prioritization happens very late in development cycle. You might discover, and you must be having an experience, most of you might be having experience about it, towards the end we start dropping lots of requirement in order to make project go in market. But dropping requirements towards the end is not giving you much advantage. You have already invested a lot of time talking, thinking, discussing, designing those requirements. Now you are unable to finish them, that's why you are dropping it, but you never prioritize early. Scrum forces you to prioritize all the time, because every sprint you need to identify what I should work on this sprints. So it enforces continuous prioritization, continuous thinking of what is the most important thing I want to see in a product. It promotes learning from uncertainties. Your requirement is uncertain, your development tools are uncertain, your team is uncertain. You need to learn from it. And the learning can only happen when you see what is coming out from it. It shows issues and risks early. It exposes that mess. It promotes collaboration. It does not tell that one person is accountable to get the work done. It tells that business work, right prioritization, right requirement will come from product owner. Development team is the best team to figure out how to implement those requirements into a working software. Scrum Masters that facilitate it, and facilitate by way of collaboration, not by way of telling what to do. The team has to figure out how to work towards the end goal. In Scrum, there is no tester, developer, business analyst. All the development team member has been given one name, development team. They might be doing testing as a job. I might be doing testing most of the time, but I am a development team member. The difference here is I am also committed to push the increment to the stakeholders at the end of the sprint. All of us has only one goal, that do we have a running software at the end? That's it. It's not like I was responsible for testing, I did everything right. What do I do if it doesn't come out? No, your goal is one, increment. So that is how it promotes collaboration. It promotes exploring requirement incrementally. The product backlog, the way we refine product backlog across the project or product lifetime is something which helps us to do incremental requirement elaboration or elicitation. It helps us in developing product incrementally and iteratively. We are not doing big bang thing. And it is suitable for complex systems. So what is complex system? Complex system are the type of system where you do know the problem, but you don't know the solution yet. If you know the solution and problem well, you have a simple system. You can project the burger system. You can make 100 burger and you can deliver for the party. It's a simple system. But when you don't know what taste your customer will like, you are discovering the recipe. It's a complex system. And in a complex system, the best way of meeting the customer need is iterating, working incrementally, showing them frequently, bring them on board in the beginning of the project. So we should not be applying simple process for a complex projects. Many times we are solving a complex problem, but we try to handle it with a very defined phases in a simple way. That doesn't work. It's better to face the rework in the beginning of the project rather than assuming everything is perfect and then going to the customer and finding out there is a huge rework needed now. Incremental and iterative development, especially the iterative development, is a planned rework development. So it's better to plan the rework rather than assuming that we will not have a rework and ending up in a rework. So that is what the Scrum is all about, and that is what I wanted to share in today's session. And let's see what all questions I can address today. So I take from the beginning now. Now, how Scrum knowledge or a certification helps someone who is managing business project of a software product company. I'm not involved in product development, but I'm managing solution rollout project for a software company. So the idea here is you need to see what problem you are solving. If you are solving a complex problem, you need to pick up the complex process. If you are not solving a complex problem, then don't confuse yourself with Scrum. But reality is, in today's project environment, especially which are dealing with software development, assuming that we are not solving complex problem is a big assumption. So it usually not true in many cases. Now, some queries related to CSPO, CSM certificate. So yes, Certified Scrum Product Owner and Certified Scrum Master certificate from Scrum Alliance mandates you to attend 2 days face-to-face classroom session from a certified Scrum trainer. You can't do Scrum Alliance certificate of CSM and CSPO just by studying something online. So that was the question. Now another question, in traditional project, let's say we have a methodology, plan, initiate, execute and all. What will be the case for Scrum? So I hope now it clarifies. In Scrum we iterate. We don't go phased approach, and inside those iterations, inside those time boxes, everything happens. Now in Scrum, how do we manage go live date to be committed as a planned, as a Scrum allows the changes is for entertain during iterations? Don't do that. See, the idea is the complex problem will have less predictability in the beginning of the project. The simple problem will have a more predictability in the beginning of the project. If you know your requirement well, you must have done this 100 times before. You have your own data which can tell what is an estimate for this particular requirement. If you are doing something first time, assuming that you can project the end date, it's possible if you put lots of contingency reserves there, if you put a lot of risks there. So the idea of Scrum is projecting end date is something is a business decision. With Scrum, without Scrum, you will face same challenges if you are attacking a problem which is not well defined, the solution which is not yet discovered. The only thing is Scrum makes you aware about the reality of the problem in the beginning. If you don't follow Scrum or an incremental approach or an iterative approach, the problem may become visible later. Now you can use your judgment, you can do a risk management and project some end date. How do you do that? Scrum has no solution for it. Whatever right now you are doing, you may keep doing that. Or you may use some Scrum based approaches of doing release planning, or say agile based approaches of release planning, because Scrum does not tell you anything about it. Scrum tells we are primarily focusing on exploration part of it. Rest of the things you need to add on top of it. So you add something on it. Now how to add? It's not a one method. It varies from the type of project you are dealing in. So how we bring Scrum into the organization, this is relatively a big subject, but you can see that first is an approach. Is something an awareness of transparency, the awareness of that, yes, we are getting into something which will make us uncomfortable in the beginning of the project. So the roles, working iteratively, and then finding out your right path. Again, there is no one way of changing the organization to agile based approach or Scrum based approach, but you need to start from somewhere. Okay, how do ensure the successful of the Scrum as there is no project manager? Now, having project manager was not helping in our traditional projects as well. See, project manager, I have worked as a project manager for long 15 years, and I was more or less, it's the most helpless job I think I was doing, where I am sandwiched between the stakeholders and the development team, and nobody listened to us, and I try to show that I am in control. But yes, all stakeholders get one person to yell on, which was a project manager. So having a one person taking an accountability of running the project was no more working. And that is why Scrum says, let's remove the scapegoat role and let's make the whole team responsible for it. Now, how do we do that? Make team give the demo of their product every month. Make every team a goal of releasing increment at the end of every sprint. People are not coding testing as their performance goal. They are releasing increment as their goal. And Scrum Master creates that self-organizing team. So Scrum Master is definitely there to create the team which delivers. You need to create the team which will deliver it. You don't have to deliver it, because if you try to deliver it, you will spoil the project. That is what the management is saying to the project managers now, or to the Scrum Masters. Don't try to dictate, else you will spoil the work. Let people figure out the best way of solving it, create an environment so that they can solve it. And that's why the role of Scrum Master is different than the way project manager role was perceived. I am not saying project manager cannot inculcate the behavior which we are talking about. We are letting team figure out how to move forward. The only notion of removing that name project manager is mainly the traditional setup where project manager was running the show on its own. So we take care of that role. Hierarchy, there is no much hierarchy in Scrum. So I would recommend that you guys please have a look at Scrum Guide. I can see a lot of detailed question. I'm trying to take the basic one, how to start working on a Scrum Master when we gain knowledge, certification, but no experience. The role of a Scrum Master is primarily twofold. One is knowing Scrum and another taking an approach which starts believing in that my people can do their work and I don't have to tell them how to do their work. The second part, anybody can start from today. Anybody who's responsible for leading and managing more than one or two or three people can start that behavior. The coaching behavior, the facilitated behavior, the servant leadership behavior. You can start working with that and it will produce more result than your existing behavior. So you can start working on that. Second, going through the formal education of Agile and Scrum will definitely help you to get Scrum knowledge so that you also know what is Scrum in detail, plus you bring those behavioral things. So just learning Scrum will not make you a good Scrum Master. Scrum along with the behavioral aspect of it can help you. The starting point could be a certified Scrum Master training, but I would say it's the starting point. It will put a seed of Scrum Master in you. It will give you a view what is Scrum Master role is, but you need to grow that tree after that. You need to make that plant blossom by putting more and more skills and knowledge into it. Okay, now I'm like we are more or less heading towards the time box. So I'm becoming bit selective on the question. Okay, so this is an interesting question. We already have an iterative model of software development except for continuous delivery. How is Scrum different from it? So now you know Scrum and you can see what it is. And you might find many similarities in your existing process, and you may find that if you add those events into your existing process, it can produce, it might solve some of the problem you might be facing. But if your iterative and incremental process is working good for you, then you don't have to move towards Scrum. You may keep doing that. But if you're struggling from customer giving you a late feedback, team not owning what they are doing, then ceremonies, events, and roles of Scrum can help you. Now, I do see a lot of questions which are getting into the details of how exactly Scrum works. I don't undermine the relevance of those questions here. But since it was more an introductory part of it, I find it difficult to address the details of it. And many of these things, like how do we handle budget, how do we handle vendors, how do we handle appraisals, how do we handle steering committee meetings, are not answered in Scrum. Scrum does not have any view for it. You keep doing what you are doing, or you discover what helps you. The essence of Scrum is it only gives you minimal thing which can be applied directly in all processes. In one environment, budgeting may work in a different way. In another environment, budgeting may work in a different way. So it does not give you any guidelines for vendor management, budget management, steering committee management, communication, reporting, matrices. It gives very, very basic details about it. Now, what are the solutions? Retrospective. So you figure out, you look at your retrospective and you create your process from there. So that's the idea of it. Okay, so friends, I think this is what I planned for this session. I see lot of questions. I need to figure out how I can handle them. I will try to post them in our forum and try to respond in a Q&A format if that makes sense. We have a forum.eisenbridge.com, and I will try to answer some of them which remains relevant for all of us. Please give me a time, say of 2 to 3 days before I can start responding to them. The another thing you can do is we have lots of videos on Agile and Scrum on our YouTube channel. You can just explore your topic, search our YouTube channel. Most probably you will get many answers, like what is the difference between Agile and Scrum? What is the difference between Agile and Kanban? How do I decide the sprint duration? All these contents are quite well discussed in some of our previous webinars. So please try to make good use of them. And I hope this session has given you an insight of how Scrum helps in solving complex product development problems. Thank you for participation.